This video is sponsored by Skillshare.
Hey Rally Besties, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're well. Today I'm very excited to get into some poetry tips that I have for you guys. My sort of approach to poetry is definitely very interesting, very unique, and I think because of that I can give the internet some very interesting advice. I want to say, if you want to check out my poetry, I do have a published poem by Sad Girl Diary. I'll link it down in the description. And I also have all of my poetry on my Instagram that I post every so often, so go check out my Instagram if you're curious. And I do have a YouTube video as well, reading you guys some of my own original poetry, so if you're interested in that podcast episode, I'll link it up in the iCard. But anyways, let's stop rambling and get on to some poetry tips to help you write better poetry and prose. Let's get into it. The first tip I have for you guys is to actually meditate and be silent before writing poetry. This sounds very, very weird, but I actually learnt this sort of tip in a haiku class that I took on Skillshare, which Skillshare is the sponsor of today's video, by the way. So to talk about the tip, of course, I need to talk about my class and what I learned during my classes on Skillshare. So I've actually been wanting to learn how to write a haiku for a long time. It's been in the back of my mind, and actually through this course on Skillshare I was able to learn so much more than I thought, and I didn't know it would transform the way that I write. If you guys haven't heard of Skillshare before, Skillshare is the biggest online learning community for all creatives. It has like thousands of classes for you guys to take, which are run by industry experts who are actually able to give their best advice through classes, in which teaches you all the skills you need to know for that particular area. Specifically, this can include, for example, how to write a novel, how to write a 3-act structure, how to write better prose. Skillshare can help take your hobbies, for example like me, my poetry, to the next level, and it helps you actually practice and hone down your skills to maybe make it a career or just deepen your passion for the particular area. Skillshare has these learning paths that are curated sequential class collections that actually organizes your learning journey. And this has actually helped me stay on track with, like, I don't know, the way that they organize their classes makes so much sense. It's so much better than my own like law courses I take at university, to be honest. But it just makes sense, and you go down all these classes, 1 sort of lecture, 2 sort of lecture, until you finish the course. And what I also really like is some of the classes that I have taken. I've taken another poetry class as well, where you actually get to submit your poem, kind of like a class submission in a way, and you get actual feedback from people in that community or in that class who have also taken the subject and have also written something like that, which I think was very, very helpful, and something that's so cool that I haven't seen anywhere else but Skillshare. But if you're already sold on Skillshare, I really recommend you guys to actually click the link in the description. The first 500 people who click that link are able to get 1 whole month of Skillshare for free, so a free trial for a whole month. And since it is literally summer, you guys can just go ahead and click on that link because you get to learn any skill that you want. I know there's lots of things that writers can develop their skill in, for example editing, for example maybe drafting, or maybe if you're in the publishing sort of space. There is a lot. I promise you'll find it on Skillshare, and yeah, I think you'll really have lots of fun like I did. So yes, I think there is such goodness in being still and actually learning, like the way that you write haiku, for example, is you listen to this sort of pull, this sort of intuitive sort of, it's a really weird thing. I think it's very interesting to take poetry from a very spiritual stance, and at least with haiku, it's really helped me write better poetry by simply writing about nature, about feelings, through personifying them through, yeah, like the sea, or through the wind, or through grass, or through like a particular feeling of weather. That sort of link really has helped me write very interesting poetry, and that's only been possible through me like sitting outside, sitting in my room. I just need to be looking outside a window that inspires me to write poetry. So I really encourage you guys to actually just sit, meditate. It doesn't need to be like a full-on meditation. It just needs to be like a few moments for you to just really think about something, and just blank your mind and just think about a particular word, meditate on it, and let this pull you through your writing. It is very weird, but maybe if you try it you might like it. And I think it's just a really fun way to kind of get into writing poetry that's very like subjective and very weird. It's a very weird spiritual thing that I kind of like, and trust me, you will surprise yourself. Oh, I actually wanted to share my haiku. This is the first haiku I've ever written. I hope I get better though, but I have it on here, and this is how it goes. It says, "There's rain inside you, a deep, ever feeling well. Drink from it without fear." And can you get the vibe? The vibe of haiku is so different to the vibe of like my other poetry. So I've truly had so much fun again with that class and actually learning how to write haikus, because I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but haikus are so cool, and I really encourage you guys to maybe use that approach through writing poetry. And you don't have to do it like to a T, but just kind of like intentionally meditate in nature. But that's the first tip. The second tip, which I just like threw this across the room, write in a physical notebook. This tip has saved me because I don't know why, it just makes you a better poet. This is my cute little Miffy book that I have. It's so cute. I got this in Japan actually on my travels. So like these are all the poems that I've written as I've been overseas. And it's supposed to be messy. It's supposed to have different sort of, I don't know, drawings, crossing out, everything. Make sure you also, another tip maybe, make sure you date your poems. I always forget. Date and name your poems. That's like a very big thing that I really encourage you guys to do as well if you don't do that already. But there's something so different about having a pen in your hand and a physical notebook that you become very personal with a physical entity. Maybe poetry writing is spiritual. I have no idea, but it's just so much better. Like trust me, having a poetry book in your bag is just very, very good. And it can be a lot smaller too. I have like lots of smaller ones as well that I just take in my handbag because it's so cool. I also like wrote a lot during my Italy trip, especially if you're traveling. Have a travel poetry book, because it just, the way that you write poetry is so much more enhanced, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? Truly, like when I went to Italy, I would go and take my poetry book everywhere I went and would just sit down and write poetry. Try to do this to romanticize your life, but also to allow the external influences of your sort of setting really influence the way that you write. And just getting out your phone and typing, it's not the same. I think there is so many different benefits that I can just talk for hours for just writing, and one of them of course includes like you physically writing helps you think about what you're writing. It also slows down the process, slows down your brain, allows you to, you know, write more intentionally, which I think is really important to practice that sort of intentional intuition in writing poetry. But yeah, I had lots and lots of fun writing on my travel through physically writing. And you look really cute, okay? You look very aesthetic, so do that. Make sure you have a physical poetry book, and it encourages you also to write a lot more. I just always have this lying in my bag or in around my room, and I grab for this all the time. So maybe that will help you write poetry more consistently as well. The next poetry tip I have is kind of self-explanatory. I hope you don't do this, but please do not edit your poetry as you write. This is the same if you're writing a chapter of a book. Do not edit as you write. I think it just kills the vibe. It just kills the vibe. And of course, the way that you write your poem is gonna sorry, I hate using that word. It's gonna not be the best perhaps, but it can also be very, very good. Lots of the poems that I write are very, very much stay to their original form. You might need to shuffle some things around, maybe change a rhyming word. Can I speak? Oh my gosh. But yeah, try your best to just really write the poem and then go back and edit. There is nothing that's like worse than getting stuck on a line and then you lose that creative momentum to continue writing the poem, if that makes sense. So I think that's a really important and underrated tip that I hope you just do subconsciously. But this is just for some maybe newer writers who don't do this. Yeah, just chill out, write the poem, read over it, edit, do everything you can, take a step back and then read it again and see how you feel, and then you can edit and see what you're doing. I do want to say quickly that the lighting might change a little bit. The sun is like setting a little bit, so don't mind the weird lighting. But the next tip is something I actually talked about with one of my friends, Matthias. I have talked about him in a couple of my videos. He also has a Substack that talks specifically about poetry. I feel like he's so much more interesting in the way that he articulates his thoughts and a lot more learned in his actual tips and advice and just contemplations about poetry writing in general. I will link his Substack down below in the description. Please go check him out and subscribe to his Substack. It's for free and everything, but he's so cool and he deserves a lot more readers. Anyways, that tip is to make sure that you write for your audience. And it's kind of difficult. I've had lots of conversations with this said Matthias. I hope he isn't watching this video because it'll be very embarrassing because I'm much a hippie poet and he's like a crazy, interesting, beautiful poet. Anyways, what am I saying? I'm saying. So I learned from him the importance of writing a poem that makes sense objectively. And I know like writing poetry and poetry reading and just like it in general, like you should be able to apply your own life to it, but there is an extent which you can't, you know what I mean? Like if it's too subjective, if it's too like up here and abstract, your audience has no guide. It's kind of just like bad writing if you don't actually keep your audience in mind. If it's too much in your fields, if it's too specific to the point where it's like not even surrounded by context, it's very selfish almost of a writer. And I think T.S. does talk about this in one of his Substacks. But of course, if you're especially writing for someone, or if you're gonna read it to someone, or if you're going to publish it anywhere, I think it's important to keep in mind the readers. Poetry isn't, and of course it's a bit different for like writing a book or anything. Poetry is a little bit more like wishy-washy. We don't know what's really going on. You can just interpret it. It's just like, you know, this beautiful like painting. It doesn't need to make sense. It can just be a couple lines. When I have some beef with that a bit, because you need context around it. You need some sort of guidance, some sort of hand leading that sort of reader through your poem. So it needs to make sense a little bit, which I'm actually working on a lot. So this is not like a tip like I'm saying, do this, do this. This is what I'm learning continually through writing poetry that makes sense. Of course it makes sense to you, the writer, but does it make sense to the audience? Will it make sense to someone who's never read your poetry before? And I kind of get into lots of traps about this too, because I use lots of imagery that people don't understand, or even the way that I write my novels, like there's particular idioms or particular metaphors or particular things that I simply like think. Like I think I shared how ants to me, no, rain and like storm smells like ants to me, because ants go crazy when the storm comes, but people don't know what the heck that means. And I've asked so many people, they're like, rain does not smell like ants. How do you know what ants smell like? And I'm just like, oh, okay. So I actually delete that. I know it's sad because it's like, oh, but no, it just confuses them. Sorry if I'm ranting too much on this tip, but like I understand the importance of writing for your audience and surrounding your poetry with more of a foundation, instead of, because I think poetry can be very wishy-washy sometimes. So that's what I'm gonna say. I'm gonna shut up now and go to the next tip. The next tip I have is to write a list on particular things that you want your poem to kind of vibe around. This is important, I think, if you're really struggling writing sort of a theme, or writing like maybe you're writing like a poetry collection or something. It's very helpful to continue writing and actually practicing your poetry through having like an overarching theme, or at least some like sort of crutch words, I guess you can call it, where you have particular words that you like to write about. For example, my poetry has lots of imagery of dust, of bones, of teeth, of angel wings, of the idea of falling, of rain, and that representing like the falling of love. Like literally, like these particular things, I sprinkle them within my poetry, and it actually helps when I do get stuck in a particular line. I can actually go boom, like, does that make sense? Like I'm able to kind of have these thoughts, these sort of idioms, these metaphors, these symbols in my mind, so that while I'm writing I can continue, and I do actually encourage you guys to write a sort of list of particular things that you want to write about, or that you kind of notice. And I think this is also such a fun like little excursion, not an excursion, kind of like a little project to do yourself, is to kind of like look at your own poetry and actually reread your poetry and see what themes jump out. Like think about your poetry as if you're researching it in an English class, like, you know what I mean? Like kind of feed it together. And it's actually so bizarre seeing how many things lead together. And I love doing this in music. Like I love reading and listening to lyrics of my favorite artists. For example, Phoebe Bridgers, in a couple of her albums, and even like collab songs with other artists, she very much always talks about the idea of a bird and a dog, and how she feels like a dog who has turned up at her owner's house and given her owner a bird. Like one of her quotes says, "And when you saw the dead little bird, you started crying." Or for example, C Rose, who's one of my other favorite artists, They talk very much about the idea of carrying something, of being like a burden, that sort of vibe. It's so interesting. So study yourself. The last step I have for you is quite practical. It's to use RhymeZone. I think you already use RhymeZone. I use NeoRhymes nearly all the time because there's something about NeoRhymes that I just adore so much. They're just so much more better than direct rhymes. Direct rhymes to me are a bit triggering, so if you want to write a bit more interesting, I always just use NeoRhymes because they're quite unexpected and quite, I don't know, pleasant to read. You see this lots again in lyricism and stuff like that. For example, the word bed might have this sort of direct rhyme of thread. Let's do it more poetic. So bed, thread, but a near rhyme is the word pretend. So you see how it's like not a direct rhyme, but it still it would fit in. I think you guys know what I mean. But that's also kind of like a helper through me writing poetry, because it is really difficult to write better poetry, but it's also really difficult to write poetry, period, like even to write bad poetry. So this actually helps me just get words down on the page again, which I think is important at the end of the day, because you will eventually get better if you just practice, and you can't practice unless there's words on the page. So I hope that makes sense. But yeah, that's all the tips I have for you guys today. So thank you guys so much for watching today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed kind of my poetry tips, my poetry advice. I'm definitely getting better at poetry, and I hope you guys are also ready to learn, because of course you can use Skillshare, by the way, to kind of continue writing and continue actually honing down your skills in poetry writing or writing in general. And of course, if you actually click the link, you get 1 month free trial. So go definitely click that link in the description. Please go check out Skillshare. I hope you have fun over there. But anyways, I love you all so much. I hope you have a wonderful day and good luck writing that poetry. I do have a video coming out. I'm not sure if it's out already, but it's a poetry process writing video where I talk especially very explicitly about writing poetry. And I think in that video, yeah, I literally write a poem with you guys and read it to you guys. So stay tuned for that video as well. I'll link it in the description once it's out. But yeah, I love you all and I hope to see you in the next writing video. Bye everyone.